Hello and welcome to this, our first quarterfinal here at Grand Prix Turin. I'm Tim Willoughby, joined by Hall of Famer Frank Carsten, and we've got two decks that can potentially be sort of slow controlling decks that can turn a corner fast. Blue-white Approach of the Second Sun on the left of our screen against Teamer Energy. Marius Heuser sneaking in at 8th place against the front runner from this tournament, Sonzogny, who has just been doing it all with his Blue-white Approach of the Second Sun list.
Yeah, Andrea has been going 13-0 before easily cruising into the top 8 in the first seed. Playing a deck that should be well positioned against Teamer Energy. Teamer Energy has been considered to be, let's say, the best deck in Standard going into this tournament, and it is also the most popular archetype in the top 8. The only deck that put 2 copies into the top 8. Featuring just a bunch of synergistic energy creatures and some of the best cards in all the Teamer colors. It just tries to deploy a reasonable board presence and attack the opponent, as well as exploit powerful removal spells like Harness Lightning. The White-Blue Approach deck, on the other hand, well, first of all, it doesn't play any creatures at all in the main deck, so all of those red removal spells, completely dead cards. And the game plan of White-Blue Approach is just to answer cards 1 for 1 in the early turns, maybe play a Fumigate to sweep the board, gain some life, and eventually just cast the 7 mana namesake card, Approach of the Second Sun. And at least in game 1, Teamer Energy has no good answer to that win condition.
Yeah, it's going to be kind of interesting to see what the shape of this matchup ends up being. One of the reasons to play blue-white is that it's been deemed to be good in this matchup. It's late game, ultimately trumping much of what can be done by the Teamer Energy list. I kind of like the fact that the way that things played out for Marius Heuser, he ended up playing that Long Tusk Cub on turn 3, playing around the sensor that is in Andrea Sonzogny's hand. We'll be carefully seeing whether or not he's going to be able to utilize that as a counterspell at any point, or if it's simply going to end up having to be cycled, which at this point seems more and more likely.
Yeah, quite often this White-Blue Approach deck tends to cycle its cards. It has a bunch of cards with cycling, Sensor you mentioned, but also Cast Out and Hieroglyphic Elimination. These cycling cards add some additional consistency to the deck, because you do have to find Approach of the Second Sun to win, and then possibly a second copy of it. The cycling cards help find the first one and then also dig towards the second one. Get there way faster than the 7 turns you might think it would.
Yeah, I would say that when I've been watching these decks in action, the amount of time between the first Approach of the Second Sun and the second, if you'll excuse the vernacular, is somewhere around the region of 3 to 4 turns.
So there we see Blessed Alliance keeping up 2 mana, and Marius may have expected the Censor there, because otherwise the Blessed Alliance probably would have gained 4 life, but it's not like Heuser has the luxury of playing around the card all game long. He may just felt like he had to deploy something to put on some pressure, because if the game goes long, this White-Blue Approach deck will just win. If you're in the Teamer Energy seat, you need to start attacking and try to make things happen quickly.
And in the main deck, there are a few cards for Marius that literally do nothing. He's got a Magma Spray in hand that simply has no targets in Game 1 against Blue-White Approach. There's also things that are of marginal utility. It's like the Sky Sovereign is obviously a big threat when it's flying in, and it does very little else than fly in as a big monster, because there are no creatures for it to hit.
Yep.
Even something like Harness Lightning, normally one of the power cards for Teamer Energy, it's an energy ritual effectively in this matchup.
Yeah. Could still, say, make a free top third together with Roller Virtuoso, but apart from that, it doesn't do much. Meanwhile, Sonzogny is missing land drops, which is not good news for him.
Yeah, needs to get up to 7 mana if he's going to cast that Approach to the Second Sun. No other way for him to win the game. Going to take a big hit here from Sky Sovereign. Is there something to say about that? It looks like we might be seeing a Blessed Alliance or one of a variety of other ways that he has to deal with attacking creatures.
Yeah, Sonzogny might be saving the Blessed Alliance for Ronas, because Ronas does have Indestructible. Looking at Sonzogny's hand, I see a bunch of Fumigates. I do believe 1 copy of Approach of the Second Sun, a Cast Out which is now getting cycled. Well, you got it, Marius.
Yeah.
3 energy, that's in the pocket.
Has to have a target as well, so it's worse than just a regular ritual for energy, if such a thing was a thing.
Yeah, it's a good play by Marius. Might as well play it now before Andrea has a chance to respond with, say, a cast out on the Ronas, but it's it's a sad state of affairs.
Elder Deep Fiend, a potential for the future. For now, though, that Hydra could be actually kind of a nice one. One of the trickier cards for Sonzoni to remove.
Well, Fumigate will work, which he has in hand.
And in abundance. I think there's more than one of them in his hand. So here's cast out for Ronas.
And one of the somewhat unusual card inclusions in Heuser's deck is Elder Deep Fiend. And I believe he does have 1 copy in hand. Could be relevant in this matchup to play it on a crucial turn, for instance when Sonzoni is about to hit 5 mana for Fumigate or 7 mana for Approach of the Second Sun. But when Sonzoni is still at 20 life,
Make that 21.
Yeah, that the Time Walk effect by tapping the lands that Elder Deep Fiend could provide, it's unlikely to make a very big difference.
Well, a Virtuoso, I believe, the pickup there.
Together with 6 energy, that's not too bad.
Just maybe checking to make sure there's not been any discrepancies on life totals. I think that we've got things fairly square here.
Yep. Looking at the archetypes in the top 8 in total, it was a bit of a surprise to me that there's no Remnant Bread at all. We had 7 different archetypes. Maybe 6 if you lump together Mortar Vehicles and Red-White Vehicles. But no Remnant Bread. I had expected to see Remnant Bread rise to the top as a way to beat the, let's say, the anti-teamer decks, but looks like people were still prepared for that. Even though Remnant Bread, I believe it had 2 out of the 4 undefeated players after day 1, the 9-0 players.
Yeah, somewhat come a cropper subsequent to that. Andrea Sonzoni at this point has 2 copies of the Approach of the Second Sun in hand, just needs to find a land in order to be able to cast them, and then it will be the 1-2 punch. 2 sequential turns, the second one round will win the game, because I don't believe that Marius in his main deck has any counter magic.
He does not. Things will change after sideboard, we will get to that when we get to it, but in game 1, Approach of the Second Sun is a card that Marius has no answer to.
I guess the Elder Deep Fiend could potentially put it off for a turn,
But I think the Elder Deep Fiend is gonna try to put Sonzoni off of Fumigate mana. And we'll see how that works out here. It will allow Heuser to get in again on the next turn for a bunch of damage. Maybe if Heuser finds his second copy of Elder Deep Fiend on the top of his deck, it's possible that he could cobble together something that that works.
Yeah, it's getting to be a gradually more and more complicated story as to how it is that Marius wins this. I feel like in all honesty, the most plausible way that Marius wins this game is that Andrea somehow just never finds a 7th land.
Yeah, but then Andrea finds business cards every turn, and then that means that Andrea will have all the answers to whatever Marius draws, so...
Look, I never said it was a good plan, okay?
Sure.
Alright, so Rogue Refiner drawing another card here for Marius. Finds a Glory Bringer. That will shorten the clock a little bit.
Yeah, but this Fumigate is gonna be devastating. The deck plays 4 copies, and it is just the perfect sweeper for the deck. Giving you time, giving you life, getting rid of all the threat and all the gremlins. Poor gremlins.
Yeah. Pour one out for our gremlin buddies. Andrea gaining a little bit of life here, clearing the board once more. The follow-up from Marius looks likely to involve
Glory.
Tusk Cub, perhaps. kicking things off with Whirl of Virtuoso, up to 5 energy there. And here's the Long Tusk Cub.
But they may very well be snatched by perhaps another Fumigate. Alternatively, some other white removal spells. Sonzoni's hand is just stacked.
Yeah, this is a really strange sort of turn of affairs where Marius is having to do everything in order to feel like he's in this game. And Andrea still hasn't actually done anything that is his sort of big winning plan. It's just sort of he's casually dealing with everything that Marius has going on, playing very sort of classic control.
Yeah, especially in game 1, this is just kind of a mismatched matchup. Marius's deck is not set up to deal with what Sonzoni is doing. I think Marius drew another red removal spell, which is essentially another dead card. And that's how Sonzoni's deck is built. Just turn all those Magma Sprays and Harness Lightnings into, well, something worthless. Hoyser may be aware of the fact that Sonzoni has 4 Blessed Alliance and 3 Immolating Glare in his deck. So maybe he doesn't even want to attack, so as to not give Sonzoni a chance to use one of those cards. But at the same time, Hoyser has to try something, because he also probably realizes that there's likely an approach of the Second Sun in Sonzoni's hand. And, well, he might as well try to win somehow before that 7th land comes down. No matter how hard that may seem. Yeah, he just passes the turn. Looks to be playing around those white instants that only deal with attacking creatures.
Sooner or later, he is going to have to attack. This is a really tough spot for him.
It's also a bit of a... He now also has the Servant of the Conduit as insurance against Blessed Alliance. Right, so it's sacrifice an attacking creature. If Hoyser attacks with both on the next turn, he can sacrifice the Servant instead of the Glorybringer. So if he's sure that Sonzoni indeed had Blessed Alliance in hand, this play makes sense.
Alright, well, Glimmer of Genius did see a basic land.
About time.
Though, it looks like it might have got scried to the bottom. Oh, no, so it may have...
Well, one way or another, there is land number 7.
Alright. From here on out, it should be a relatively straightforward equation. Andrea Sonzoni needs to just double-check to make sure that if he goes up to 18, that he's not simply dead next turn.
And he is not.
No.
And he has a 2nd copy in hand, right?
Yes.
This deck plays 4 copies of Approach of the Second Sun, to make it much more likely that you actually draw 2 of them, so you can play them on consecutive turns. It might seem like a lot, 4 copies of a 7 mana card, but if it is your primary win condition and it actually becomes better in multiples, it's fine to play it as a 4-off. Now maybe if Hoyser drew Elder Deep Fiend, something could happen here, but I don't think he did. And we are likely going to see our first 1-0.
There we go. Straightforward stuff. First game going to Andrea Sonzoni. Even ignoring the actual win condition itself, it felt like he was in fairly good control of that game at almost every stage. Where people have talked about blue-white approach being good against Temur Energy, so far it looks like they may well be correct.
Yeah, it's based on a number of factors, at least for game 1. The first one is, well, you don't have any targets for the red removal spells. Second one is Fumigate matches up quite well against the creature-based Temur Energy deck. And the third one is, yeah, the Temur Energy deck doesn't have a good answer to Approach of the Second Sun. And fourth, the blue-white approach deck is quite consistent thanks to all the card draw. Alright, things may change after sideboard soon enough.
We will get a chance to see some more of this match soon enough, but we're going to jump across and look at a little bit of the matchup between Robin Dola and Christian Hauck. This is our look-in. It's worth noting that the way that this has gone is that they had a deck check, so they started a little behind everyone else. Already the Scarab God in play for Robin Dola. He's managed to make a zombie version of Rogue Refiner up against an entirely still alive version of Rogue Refiner and Long Tusk Cub from Christian Hauck, who has got 9 energy, so that Long Tusk Cub is a relatively scary cat.
Still, whenever one of the two players has the Scarab God in play and can be activating it, have to give the advantage to that player. And Robin Dolar, he's already won Grand Prix before over the course of his career. One of the best players from Slovenia, and very adept at playing control decks. He felt that the Scarab God was a good enough reason to play blue-black over, let's say, blue-red, which has been a popular color combination as well. And looking at the power of that god on the battlefield here, can't fault him for that.
Yeah, Robin Dolar has not really had to jump through any hoops to be able to make the Scarab God work in his deck, because the color base that he's on just naturally supports it. We've seen Teamer Energy lists, we've seen red-blue control lists finagling with their mana in order to try and find a way of getting the Scarab God involved, because it is such a potent threat. For Robin Dolar, though, this is, you know, another day at the office in terms of making sure that the Scarab God can do its thing.
Yep.
And Grasp of Darkness, meaning that Rogue Refiner taking down that Long Tusk Cub and taking out most of Christian Hauck's energy. While, yes, there was a Sky Sovereign follow-up, there's just more creatures that Robin Dolar can gradually grab from his opponent's graveyard. It's going to be a rough old ride for Christian Hauck here, unless he can keep that Sky Sovereign in play for quite some time.
The Sky Sovereign is going to be good, though, because I don't think there are any flying creatures around that Robin can use as blockers. Some good sequencing here, putting the Scarab God trigger on the stack in the upkeep, and then in response getting a zombie from the graveyard, so that once the Scarab God's trigger resolves, you get, well, one scry and one point of ping to the opponent.
So Dolar just considering his scrying here.
Yeah, at this point he's probably digging towards some answer to the Sky Sovereign, because that is the threat that he may be a little worried about still. He's still at 20 life, so he has plenty of time to find an answer. Did he find Torrential Gearhulk there?
I believe so.
That's also pretty good with the Scarab God. If it ultimately dies, bring back Torrential Gearhulk. That's not too bad for 4 mana. But maybe with some Grasp of Darkness action, Robin can cobble together a way to deal with the Sky Sovereign. Or perhaps even just beat it in a damage race. Would also not be impossible.
Yeah, there's going to be the extra life loss off the Scarab God as well, gradually as more and more zombies come into play for Robin Dolar. Quick update on scores on these tables. While our matches on camera have been going comparatively slowly, our other matches moving along at quite the pace. We have both the Mardu vehicles versus Red White vehicles matchup at 1-1, and Mono Black Zombies against Godfarer's Gift against 1-1. Worth noting, though, that Simon Nielsen had picked up a game loss going into this top 8 before a deck reg error. I believe that he'd just written Chandra rather than actually making clear which Chandra. So he picked up his first game against the Zombies list, meaning it is now 1-1. All of the other matches in our feature match area, aside from those ones that we've had on camera, now going to their deciding game.
Speaking of camera, this is a big play by Hauck here. 3 damage from the Sky Sovereign to the Scarab God, and then 2 more from Magma Spray. And importantly, this would exile the Scarab God, so it won't even return. That's a big swing. Typically, Magma Spray would not be that powerful in this matchup because all of Robin Dolar's creatures are so big, but combining it with Sky Sovereign, that's actually the perfect answer to the god. Yeah, and maybe Hauck is swinging the game here.
Normally, you wouldn't want to have to play 2 cards to kill off one of your opponent's creatures, especially if it's the Scarab God that comes back. Here, Christian Hauck has managed to cobble together his own way of killing off the Scarab God, still only really using 1 card. Dolar given pause on this one.
I believe he has Grasp of Darkness in hand, and might be thinking about killing his own Scarab God in response to the Magma Spray, just so that it would die and return back to his hand.
That sounds defensible to me.
Yeah. Then again, Dolar might also need the Grasp of Darkness together with his Torrential Gearhulk to double grasp the Sky Sovereign in a couple turns from now. So
we've heard that the other match is ready. We're going to watch this for maybe a turn or so more just to see where things go in the very short term on this matchup. I think that the early turns of the Approach the Second Sun matchup perhaps not quite as exciting as the later turns of this game.
yeah, although this game can probably still take a while, as it often does with a control deck. Okay, so Dolar doesn't actually try to cobble together double grasp to actually kill Sky Sovereign, but instead goes for the Rogue Refiner in an attempt to deprive Hauk of pilots for the Sky Sovereign.
Yeah,
Note there's still a Lumbering Falls that could get into the Sky Ship. I'm not sure how that exactly works. A land jumps into a humongous Sky Ship, but
hey, we all want to fly. we all want to fly.
Even lands want to fly. Sure.
Is that another copy of the Scarab God in hand now for Robin Dolar? It looks like it might be. So he's got Scarab God and a Torrential Gearhulk in hand. Passes the turn with mana up, presumably wanting to get that Gearhulk doing its thing.
Yeah, and I think I like the way Robin played this. He's just going to say, I'm not going to try to answer all of Hauk's cards one for one in the long term. I have switched from trying to control the game into I'm going to enter a damage race. And I feel favored in this damage race. And indeed, he is. Especially with that Torrential Gearhulk that could come down to either counter or kill whatever blocker Hauk would deploy. Robin has potentially a lethal attack on the next turn.
Yeah, the 4/4 zombie version of Bristling Hydra, currently a 5/5 thanks to that +1/+1 counter. All of the energy required to make that happen coming from Christian Hauk's cards, thanks to the Scarab God. So here comes Lumbering Falls. It's got hexproof. It crews up Sky Sovereign. Sky Sovereign getting stuck in. Does its damage to Bristling Hydra.
Yeah, I think Hauk was thinking, okay, what can I still beat? Well, if Robin has Torrential Gearhulk, I'm probably not going to win. So I'm not even going to try to play around it. Just going to swing in with the Sky Sovereign. And that's not going to do it, because Torrential Gearhulk and Bristling Hydra will swing in for the kill on the next turn.
Lovely stuff. Robin Dolar picking up his first game. And we're going to get a chance to jump back to the main match that we were watching on the other table, that being Andrea Sonzogni against Marius Heuser. Marius had a mulligan to 6, but looks like he's drawn out of it kind of okay thus far. Meanwhile, Andrea, just 2 lands in play at this point, and that was the sticking point for him last game. If there was a way that he was going to lose, it was by not hitting his land drops. We see that there's a little bit of cycling going on in his hand, but he needs to hit those lands, otherwise this is the way that Marius Heuser could potentially run away with the game.
Yeah, one thing that has changed after sideboard is that Heuser has almost surely added negates to his deck, whereas Sonzoni may have added something like Dispel in response, or potentially Sphinx of the Final Word to get around Heuser's newfound ability to counter the game-winning Approach of the Second Sun.
This Teamer Energy deck, it feels to me like it's got a very, very wide range of roles that it can play in any given game. Sometimes, I mean, this Long Tusk Cub right now looks like it's applying the beatdown, and it certainly is. It has the opportunity, the Teamer Energy deck, to start stealing creatures, to start countering spells. It feels to me like in some respects this is kind of a Jundi deck. It's like classically mid-range, able to adjust what it's doing based on what it thinks is going to be best against almost any opponent.
Yeah, in this matchup it's kind of taking a fish or merfolk approach at this point, where it's like deploy a couple of powerful creatures, start attacking, and then protect your game plan with counter magic. Now I don't think Heuser has any counter magic yet, but as long as Sonzoni is not drawing any lands, Heuser doesn't have to worry too much about the Approach of the Second Sun.
Here comes Chandra.
Torch of Defiance, and that's also an addition from the sideboard. Planeswalkers are quite powerful against the White-Blue Approach deck because, well, at least in game 1, White-Blue Approach doesn't have any creatures to pressure them. This may change after board, because Andrea does have Sphinx of the Final Word and Regal Caracal in the sideboard, but even then an early Planeswalker is something that White-Blue has trouble dealing with. Fumigate, for instance, doesn't sweep it. Counter spells, they work, but you have to have mana open. The only good answer that Sonzoni has against Chandra is Cast Out.
Or winning the game in time.
Yeah, but
I
at this point, that's I think Chandra is gonna ultimate before Sonzoni has a chance to win the game with 2 copies of Approach.
I have actually seen Sonzoni defeating a Chandra emblem.
All right.
It did
That's
involve
impressive.
casting Approach the Second Sun 2 consecutive turns.
Sure.
And the second time round it was top decked. So he was definitely fortunate. That was against Bart Van Etten.
Sounds like a close game.
It was a nail biter, and you could see Andrea at the time was pretty shaken up. He knew that that was the only way that he was winning, and it all worked out. And since then, it's all been working out for him pretty much the entire tournament. His copies of Approach the Second Sun, if he was making little tally marks on each one to see how many games they'd won, each and every one of them at this point, I would imagine, would be just riddled with tick marks.
But yeah, that Chandra is going to have a big impact on this game. To me, it just looks like Andrea has to find a cast out before she will ultimate, because I don't think Andrea will have time. Maybe if Andrea would have been at 6 mana at this point in the game, he could have made the play that you described, just play Approach in 2 consecutive turns and win before all those ultimate triggers. But at this point, it's gonna be tough.
But I kind of like getting a chance to see Chandra's emblem in action. So often it's an insta-scoop, but at least the Blue-White Approach deck is capable of gaining life, that it means that you can sometimes have at least a couple of turns of action with the emblem in play.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't see Planeswalkers go ultimate all that often, because most of the decks in Standard, they're more based around creature combat, and then whenever a Planeswalker comes down, it's just gonna be attacked immediately. Not so much in this matchup.
The emblem, of course, meaning that every time you cast an instant or sorcery, you get to... sorry, it's a spell of any kind, you get to deal 5 damage to target creature or player. Andrea Sonzoni does not have very many creatures, and he has 15 life. 3 spells would be enough to kill him off once Chandra is ultimate.
Yeah, now Heuser probably knows how this is gonna play out, and he might think, well, if I can ultimate Chandra on the next turn, things are gonna go well anyway. I may have to keep 3 spells in hand, but he has 4 spells now, so he can surely commit 1 more to the board in case Sonzoni finds the cast out on the next turn. Ooh, and that's a negate, I believe. So that's a good way to protect Chandra as well. I guess Heuser also has the chance of just developing his board even further, saying, well, I don't think you have cast out, probably would have cast it already, not gonna keep mana up for negate, and well, even if you do, then I'm just gonna attack you with Rogue Refiner, a Bristling Hydra, and say, counter your next Fumigate. So this is a very tough spot for Andrea at this point. He has so many angles of attack to defend from.
So he casts Fumigate here. Goes up to 19.
It's a start.
Next turn, he's going to be able to cast Approach the Second Sun. The following turn, he's going to be able to cast Approach the Second Sun again. Yeah. He has 2 copies. He has the basic land now. It's
actually a really good hand for Sonzoni.
Glorybringer is a pretty nice spell to cast, though, to shorten that clock.
One important interaction to point out regarding negate versus Approach of the Second Sun is that countering the first one doesn't really matter all that much. Whether or not the first approach resolves, that's not gonna make a difference. Only when you resolve the second approach of the Second Sun, it checks if you've cast another approach this game. It doesn't matter whether you've resolved an approach this game. So Heuser, if he wants to manage this properly, should probably try to counter the second approach and just let the first one resolve. Unless negating that means that he has lethal on the next turn immediately.
Yeah, the life swing is certainly not completely irrelevant. 7 points of life in a race does matter. So this turn, it's relatively safe to tap out for Glorybringer. Even if there's an approach this turn, that just means that from then on, Marius can hold up negate.
On the other hand, what Marius might be worried about, and this is a sequence that could happen, is land approach on the next turn, land approach dispel on the turn after.
Yeah,
to which he doesn't have a proper response.
It would be pretty tough. All right, we're approaching the second sun. Going up to 21. That's a lot of damage for Marius to deal here.
So if Andrea finds a land on top, he might actually be able to steal this game, even against a Chandra emblem. Because then he can play land, approach, and dispel Marius's negate.
Does he have the dispel in hand? I haven't seen.
I believe he does.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
Oh, this could be a heartbreaker for Marius. I mean, if you can't win with a Chandra emblem in play, then how are you ever going to win?
Well, it's still a lot of damage here.
Crunching through. Andrea dropping to 10.
Yeah, I think it's land or bust pretty much this turn. No land. And also 5 damage from the emblem for the negate. Yeah, that's going to be lethal on the next turn. But it was close.
Yeah, I mean,
if like Andrea had a chance to steal it there in a way that I wasn't expecting for sure.
Let's have a little look in at our other match, see how they're getting on as these players shuffle up for their deciding game. Robin Dolar, we saw him pick their first game up against Christian Hauk. Looks like the life totals already pretty low, and there's a dispossess that has been cast. We'll try and find out exactly what happened with that. It looks like it may have been censored. Okay. So we are still in the early stage of this game. Supreme Will there stopping Bristling Hydra.
Well, so far things look to be going well for Robin Dolar. When you're playing the control deck and it's well, approximately turn 5, the board is still empty, you're still at 20 life, that's exactly the position where you want to be at. Because bit by bit you're transitioning into the mid to late game, and that's where the blue-black control deck excels.
Looks like Robin may be missing a land drop somewhere in the mix here, though. And much as we said for Timur Energy in the other matchup, after sideboarding, this is when potentially Christian Hauk could have a little bit of counter magic of his own.
Yep, he does. Apart from the Dispossessed that he surely boarded in, he also has copies of Negate, 4 copies in his sideboard, a Chandra, Torch of Defiance, maybe a Tireless Tracker, whereas he's probably happy to take out some copies of Magma Spray and other removal spells that don't match up all that well against what Robin Dolar is trying to do. So I think Timur Energy will improve a little bit in the post-sideboard games.
We have a quick result for you, though. Leon van der Lieden in the big vehicles match. Mardu Vehicles defeated Red-White Vehicles. We'll see Leon in his semi-final. He's going to be up against the winner of Approach the Second Sun versus Timur Energy. Not quite sure which one he'd prefer to play against those two.
It's a good question indeed. I would probably go for the Approach deck, because I would guess that Mardu Vehicles doesn't care too much about Fumigate, given that it has so many vehicles, and is fast enough to win the game before Approach of the Second Sun comes down.
And we have another result. Our Mono Black Zombies have defeated Simon Nielsen's Godfarer's Gift. So Parazzoli, he will be up against the winner of this match, Robin Dolar or Christian Hauk. So at the moment, we know that we're going to have an aggro deck in each of our semi-finals. Here we've kind of got the control decks played the control decks, the aggro decks played the aggro decks, but we're going to have some slightly more back and forth games, shall we say, in both our sets of semi-finals.
Well, in any matchup, you could say that one deck is taking the control role and one deck is taking the aggro role. In this particular game, it's Robin Doler taking the control role. I guess when your deck is named control, you pretty much have to.
Yes.
And Hauk is taking the aggro role, although things tend to be a bit more fluid after sideboard.
Yeah, I have to imagine that if it comes down to it, Robin Dolar would be pretty happy to play against something like the Approach of the Second Sun deck, because he is the person that has the most access to counter magic in this top 8. And that means that when your opponent needs to resolve one specific spell to win the game, you've presumably got a pretty good matchup.
It sounds accurate in theory.
I guess Sphinx the Final Word potentially has something to say about that one, the word being no.
Yeah, also Robin has plenty of creature removal in his main deck that is not going to be particularly effective against the approach deck, but we'll see how it works out if we get to that matchup.
This one sort of moving pretty slowly. I think maybe we'll head back and see the deciding game between Team Energy and Approach of the Second Sun. That one's just kicking off now. We can see Marius Hoser just finishing off resolving an Attune with Ether to find that basic island there.
Always a good start. Free energy is what any energy deck is happy with. The core of the energy package is not gonna go away after Ixalan is gonna rotate into the format. That's the release on September 29, where all of Kaladesh block is still going to be legal in standard. So pretty much the entirety of the Temur energy deck is gonna stick around. If you like playing it now, you'll be able to play it for many, many months.
I'm looking forward to seeing the dinosaur energy decks. That seems cool to me.
Pirate energy.
And why not?
Yeah, we'll see how those hybridize together.
So Rugglefinder coming down here, and Andrea just briefly pausing before letting Marius gain his energy, draw his cards, etc. Looks like there may be a sensor or similar. No, he says, okay, you can have that one. Up to 5 energy, Marius goes, draws his card for the turn, and passes things back.
If Andrea would have had a counterspell here, he probably would have played it. You know, take out the 2-for-1 card, use your mana on that turn. So if I'm in Hoiser's seat, I am not too worried about facing Sensor or Supreme Will at this point. I'm just thinking, well, Sanzoni was just pausing for a little bit, but it was just a bluff.
Showboating, trying to at least give the suggestion that he might have counter magic in hand. Even if not for that moment, then for later on where perhaps he needs to get something more important through. And that a really interesting one in terms of reinforcing the idea that he might have a sensor. Plays Blessed Alliance, does not escalate, keeps 2 mana open. Now, there aren't too many 2-mana spells that you would keep open on an empty board here. In principle, I guess that there could be some cycling, but Sensor is the one that he's kind of screaming with his play, and Marius does go for a 3-mana spell rather than a 4-mana one. Andrea says, yep, that resolves.
Yeah, very interesting. Really putting the fear into Marius's head, and it worked.
Now the concern again is Andrea has missed a land drop. Where there are some control decks that can pretty much function and do most of their things on 4 mana, he absolutely needs 7 mana before he can win the game. So he's kind of in a holding pattern until then of just trying to make sure that his life total and the board haven't been too badly affected.
Still, if I am in Marius' seat here, I would not put Andrea on Sensor. Given that he's missing land drops, I would just guess that he's super showboating. And if he had Sensor, he probably would have cycled it to hit some land drops. I wouldn't be going out of my way to play around Sensor if I were in Marius' seat here, despite how much Andrea wants him to believe that he has it.
Well, this is a turn where he actually does have 4 mana's worth of spells that he really does want to cast. Starts off with the Long Tusk Cub. And just passes. Does not go for a Servant of the Conduit here.
And one reason not to play it might be to play around Fumigate a little bit, which is obviously the big threat on turn 5. You don't want to lose all too many cards to it. But maybe Marius really believes that Andrea has Sensor still in hand and wants to play around it all game. It's hard to figure out what these players are really believing at this point.
More copies of Immolating Glare there, able to deal with the big attacker rather than Blessed Alliance simply taking down a Thopter. Blessed Alliance getting a lot weaker the more creatures there are on the other side of the battlefield in terms of at least controlling the creatures. Whereas destroying target attacking creature, a little bit of an upgrade even if it is slightly less flexible.
And something that Marius may also be thinking about here is, well, if Andrea had Fumigate, would he have played Immolating Glare? Probably Andrea would still have, and I think that's also the case. Wait, it's just gain 4 life?
Marius says, sure. I guess that this is Andrea's way of saying, if the best that I can do is pay 2 extra mana to deal with one of your Thopters, then that best is not really good enough. I'd rather work it a different way. Westvale Abbey coming along for Andrea. So technically, I guess he does have another win condition than an Approach of the Second Sun. Though I would be stunned if he's won any games with his Westvale Abbey, or indeed transforming it at any point in this tournament.
That seems to go a little deep. At least his deck is filled with life gain cards to keep the activations going. But yeah, technically making 5 tokens and then turning it into Ormadal. It takes a while, but it is a path to victory.
All right, I take back everything I said about only having 1 win condition. So here comes Long Tusk Cub alongside a couple of Thopters. 2 energy, just part of the benefit that Marius Heuser gets out of that attack. The other part being 20% of Andrea Sonzogni's life.
Yeah, at this point, if you're in Marius' seat, you really have to figure out what can Sonzoni have, and also why would he just play the Blessed Alliance to gain 4 life. That play is still a bit puzzling to me, but Chandra is always good. Doesn't matter what kind of white creature removal spells Sonzoni has. Chandra is going to be tough to deal with, and it's also the best hedge if you believe that Sonzoni is holding Fumigate.
So Cast Out does deal with Chandra Torture Defiance, at least for now. I guess it asks the question of Marius as to whether or not he wants to use any counter magic.
Yeah, might be worth protecting. On the other hand, if you believe that there is Approach of the Second Sun coming, potentially 2 copies of Approach, you really want to keep the negate for the win condition of Sonzoni. I think if you're Heuser, you already have more than enough threats, also more threats in hand. So I'd rather keep the negate for the win condition rather than trying to protect essentially a superfluous threat.
Again, Andrea has 2 copies of Approach to the Second Sun. I guess that, and it's probably worth, I don't know, someone with a PhD in such things writing an article on the maths of how many turns you need to have played to consistently have 2 copies of Approach to the Second Sun, such that you can potentially do the 1-2 punch.
Well, depends on what you call consistently, but without going in too much detail on all the hypergeometric distributions, I'm pretty sure that you want to be playing 4 if that is something you're interested in. Let's say turn 7 Approach, turn 8 Approach, just play 4.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
With Tree, it's not even likely that you'll find 1 copy in any given game, and finding 2 is typically very unlikely.
But that is the sum total of Andrea Sonzoni's hand here. The first one, not overly bad, but somewhat overshadowed by the second. Though obviously the notion of a sun casting a shadow, a little bit complicated. I kind of like the way that Andrea gestures towards his deck. It's not quite clear how much of it is him just pointing out that he's going to be drawing a card, and a part of how much of it is him knocking on his deck for the cards that he need. Casts a Fumigate, which came off the top, ultimately straight into Negate. that negate there, because at this point Marius smells blood in the water, knows that there's the potential to actually knock Andrea really low on life total with attacks on this turn.
Yeah, currently he can attack for 10 after double pumping his Longtusk Cup. So together with Glorybringer, that might actually be lethal. For 1 mana, I don't think there's anything in Sonzoni's deck that can deal with it. Alternatively, Heuser also has drawn another copy of Negate as an insurance, just in case. So I think Heuser has all the tools he needs to win this game.
It's looking a little bit that way. We have a lot of energy on board now, so +4/+4 for a Longtusk Cub, the most efficient way of stacking up that energy. But he may just not have to use too much of it now if it's a matter of putting Andrea in check if he can't quite get the kill. So this is 11 damage coming through, putting Andrea on just 3 points of life.
Yeah, not necessarily the kill that may have been possible, but this is also pretty safe, given that Heuser has Negate in hand. Once you see a line that works towards victory, this will just work. And that does it.
The approach of the Second Sun player had a fantastic run. He came in at #1 seed here in the quarterfinals at GP Turin, but Marius Heuser, he snuck in 8th place, and he found a way of stringing together what he needed to knock the blue-white approach, the Second Sun deck, out of our top 8. We'll see more of Marius in his semi-finals, but I believe that there's still one match just chugging along. We're going to get a chance to move across in a moment and see our final quarterfinal that's in play, that one being the one between Robin Dolar on the left of our screen and Christian Hauck. Dolar already a game up, and Christian Hauck on just 4 life, facing down, well, a gigantic board of threats. Scarab Gods on both sides of the table at this point.
This is this is a tough one, because when both players have the Scarab God, you can get into this game where both players want to keep mana up to steal a creature in response to the other activation. But just looking at the board right now, Dolar seems to be ahead. His creatures are just bigger. Definitely bigger than all those Thopter tokens.
Yeah, Christian on 4 life, forced on some big blocks here. And after these big blocks finish, there's still the mana available for Robin Dolar to do even more.
Yeah, just get back anything that died, potentially. This seems to be a setting where Dolar has a big advantage. So Hauck has to block all of them. And yeah, if you're in Hauck's position, killing the Scarab God probably doesn't help all that much, so you might as well jump block it. And then, yeah, you have to start working through the creatures one way or another. So might as well line up some blocks for the Torrential Gearhulk. So now Dolar could, well, either kill a Thopter token and the Rogue Refiner, or put the Scarab God first, and then potentially animate the Scarab God with his own to make sure that it is not gonna return. Plenty of options available to Dolar here.
And very few available to Christian Hauck by comparison.
Or just animate the Torrential Gearhulk. That seems even better.
Yeah, get your Gearhulk back, kill off another creature with Grasp of Darkness or a Fatal Push from the graveyard.
I like that. Because, yeah, sure, the Scarab God is going to return, but I don't think Hauck will have the luxury or the time to recast everything. Not when he's at 4 life and facing so many potentially lethal threats.
Robin Dolar, there's been a number of commenters in our chat that have suggested that he's well positioned in this top 8, looking to convert with blue-black control again. Just running down what our semi-final match is going to be. It's going to be Temur Energy against Mardu Vehicles, then Mono-Black Zombies against the winner of this matchup.
Alright, now Hauck essentially needs to produce 4 blockers, given that Dolar has a Scarab God activation at the ready. Hauck also needs to figure out a way to deal with the Scarab God trigger, because in 2 upkeeps he will just lose life to it. And given that he's already at 4, that's also gonna spell game over.
I think that he has a confiscation coup, which is kind of interesting here.
Yeah, that's
Stealing the
plan.
Scarab Gob seems like good darts.
That's at least a way to take out one creature and a way to stop the upkeep trigger of the Scarab God. Not sure it's yeah, I don't think he has a better plan. Just has to do that, hope that it resolves.
I mean, this pushes Robin Dolar to use his Scarab God now, because in a second, if he doesn't, it won't be around anymore.
Doesn't Dolar also have Supreme Will in hand?
It looks like he has a Supreme Will.
He
That
could
seems
just
to me
counter
like
it.
a straightforward way of doing this.
Okay.
Grasp of Darkness on Rogue Refiner from the graveyard.
Then again, by making this play, Haukna still has to find 2 more blockers. Because Robin has 3 lethal creatures. There's a big Torrential Gearhulk and 2 Eternalized Zombies.
And it may be that now Hauk's realizing that that Scarab God's coming to play tapped, so it's not representing a blocker, just one less Scarab God to worry about.
Yeah, that Langtus Cup, it's 1 blocker, but that's not going to be enough, I don't think. Seems like the Wonder from Slovenia is going to take this quarters.
Fatal push just to make sure here. And here's some big swings. There's a handshake. We have our semi-finalists. It's going to be Robin Dolar's blue-black control. He is going to be up against the mono-black zombies list on, and then we're also going to have Mardu vehicles against Tima Energy. That is the end of our quarterfinals. We will be back very, very soon for you with our semi-finals. But first, these messages.